Kelt admits Rutch and Elma really saved his butt back there with the gambling hall and tells them to eat to their heart's content today since everything is on him. Rutch hurriedly asks if he's sure it's okay since this is an expensive restaurant, but he tells her to not sweat it since he wouldn't have the gold he does if they hadn't rescued him. Rutch says many of the people there seem to be in cahoots with Robic, but Kelt reminds her that when a cockatrice is injured, its cohorts devour it alive. He admits it was a shame to let that 160 million gold go just like that, but Rutch says the vibe in there was dangerous and she thinks it's better to make an earning exploring dream holes. Count Isis angrily asks for another drink, and as Rutch is hiding his face, he overhears him talking about nobles from other lands being summoned to Lacarinus. He hurriedly thanks Kelt for the meal, but says they need to get out of here, so Kelt cheerily decides to eat the remaining food. Outside, Rutch asks Elma what got into him so suddenly, so he says Count Isis was in there, and he's sure there's going to be a major movement soon. He admits they can't completely remove themselves from the situation as adventurers, so they head to a store to buy special armor. The shopkeeper shows Elma the volcano armor and the ancient armor, and Elma disappointingly sees that this is the best he's got, remarking that the volcano armor doesn't offer much of a boost in defense and the ancient armor has way more cons than pros. Later, Rutch says they saw many kinds of armor today, but none of them provided that much of an edge over Elma's current one. Elma says trying out stores isn't their only option and suggests that they can go searching for metal since he can ask Old Man. Rutch agrees and asks if he knows where they can look, so Elma confirms that he does and says it's time to go try their luck with the alchemist in this town. The alchemist is a class capable of creating an immense variety of items through item synthesis. Elma remarks that becoming acquaintances with a skilled alchemist would make it easier for him to acquire the items he wants, and they'd be making more gold. On top of that, they can develop attacks that strike their opponent's weakness by mixing multiple magic stones. They can also manipulate golems, so if an alchemist fulfills their role beautifully, they become quite a powerful class. However, Elma admits meaningful inroads haven't been made in class development in this world, so high-ranking alchemists are either surrounded by nobles as a source to line their pockets with gold or hail from families who have honed their craft for generations. Kareth asks Elma what brought him here, so he starts asking if she can synthesize armor out of items. However, she says she can't since she's a low-level C-rank adventurer, and even if she did have such skills, she would be serving merchants and nobles. Rutch hurriedly asks if she knows any other alchemist who might be of help, so she admits she's never heard of someone like that. However, she says she's heard a rumor that the adventurer clan, Mithril Whistle, is harboring an extremely talented alchemist. Elma remembers that Lord Selvar Chamfron belongs to that house. Kareth says shopkeepers she knows have mentioned that there are instances where multiple shops have received the same rare item in large numbers, so some have begun to question if there's a clan out there harboring an alchemist. Elma remarks that he'd want to negotiate directly with the alchemist, but it'll be difficult if a clan's involved in hiding them. Kareth warns him that he might become an enemy of the clan if he conducts himself poorly, so he says hardship is inevitable when you want to acquire an item you're after, and he knows of a way to make contact with them. He says he'll try to beat into the punch when it comes to collecting items and try to negotiate with them. Sure bro, that definitely won't cause any issues. Kareth isn't sure, but Rutch excitedly says she believes in Elma. Elma sees that the Mithril Whistle's main fighting forces are centered around mid and B-rank adventurers. He believes they're after requests for medicinal herbs, ores, and materials for runes. Kelt decides to search for any conspicuous requests for those items, hearing which Elma is touched, and says he really has changed a lot from when they first met him. Alarmed, Kelt hurriedly says he's only helping them out now so he can cash in on a juicy deal later. He warns them that the Mithril Whistle isn't a clan known for their good behavior, and the story goes that Selvar was either an ex-bandit or an ex-knight who served a noble but was fired for misbehavior. Kelt asks Elma if he really needs to bear this risk for a single piece of armor, so Elma determinedly affirms this. Kelt understands but tells him to make sure to not poke the sleeping dragon. However, Elma says depending on the situation, he may want to poach the Mithril Whistle's alchemist since he needs the help of an alchemist if he wants to aim higher. He says his potential suspected enemy is the Dream God's vanguard since Carlos wasn't the only A-rank adventurer they had in their ranks, and now that they've taken him out, they're most certainly going to set their sights on them. Rutch charily says she pities anyone who's after them, so Kelt admits she's got a point. Later, as they're looking through the quests, Elma spots one called Trade Route Culling and remarks that the level range and item drops meet the Mithril Whistle's conditions. He tells Rutch she did excellent work, and the next day, he and Rutch pay a visit to the raid meet-up site just outside the city. Upon arriving, Elma notices adventures from the Mithril Whistle and mutters that it looks like he was right on the money. A guy starts insulting them and Elma remarks that he looks like a flame fencer, a class that manipulates flames and uses their swordsmanship to baffle their opponents. They don't have any standout strengths, but they quickly rack up damage and can fight from both mid and long range. A girl starts insulting them too, so Elma recognizes that she's a dancer and inwardly says these two are probably the representatives of the group. She's definitely an attractive representative. The man introduces himself as Frang and orders them to see themselves home since they're more than capable of handling this raid on their own. Elma annoyingly says he should have discussed that with the guild and inwardly explains the Mithril Whistle are the ones monopolizing Drebhole resources and controlling the market, so demanding that the guild grant them exclusive rights just isn't going to fly. Frang summons a fireball, shocking Elma, who asks why he wasted an entire skill book on such a weak it's already available in his skill tree. Stunned, Frang angrily says he's going to kill them, as Elma remarks that he must not take him lightly since he was able to make it this far with such a janky build. When an enemy is so weak, you start thinking they have a trick up their sleeve. As they head into the Drebhole, Rutch is surprised by how many high-level Orients there are, and Elmo cheerily says the drops will be enough for them, which relieves Rutch. Rutch worryingly asks Elma if he's prioritizing item drops over probing the Mithril Whistle, but he tells her to not be silly since both are important. He says their goal is to find themselves in a favorable position to negotiate, and their other goal is the Orsec drop item, Invidit, a material needed to craft armor. However, he warns her that they need to be mindful of the Orient's attack and defense since they also have skills that work from both close and mid-range. Frang says the guild appointed him as the lead, but Elma says they have the right to submit a petition against his guild, so Frang annoyingly says he's an eyesore and says he doesn't think Elma has room to complain if his orders are reasonable like a villainous teacher. Elma remarks that he could consider outright ignoring his orders if he's prepared to be reported to the guild in the worst-case scenario. However, Frang tells Elma and Rutch to fight as the vanguard alone, surprising them, hits Helena. He thinks he's punishing them by doing this, but they instantly agree and get out of the carriage. Rutch asks Elma if he's sure they'll be fine, but he reminds her that Orients have slow and predictable attacks, and she smilingly understands what he means. He swiftly parries an attack, and Rutch rushes forward to defeat it in one blow, using her critical silver bullet. Frang and the others watch in shock as Elma tells Rutch to not worry about the drops since there are so many ants here. As Elma and Rutch are surrounded by around 20 Orients, he mutters that he's the one they'll be dancing with. He remarks that there are three main things one should be alert about when dealing with Orients. They will swiftly claw at foes with iron claws, they'll charge at you at high speeds with rush, and they will fire off massive rocks with rock cannon. Rutch and Elma swiftly work together to take down the ants one after another and level up to 81. The Mithril Whistles are shocked by how quickly they were able to kill the Orients, and Frang questions who the hell they are. Rutch happily sees that an Invidit crystal stone has finally dropped, and Elma says this is the item they were after. However, he remarks that this isn't enough for the blacksmith it would be brought to since blacksmiths require purity, and he needs to borrow the talents of an alchemist. Frang annoyingly says Selver went on and on about how tough Orients are, but they just end up bursting apart so quickly. You go fight them then, idiot. The girl. Ein questions if these two are the ones who took down the blackened flameblade. She says there shouldn't be that many parties with the same rare classes like theirs among the upper ranks. Frang and the rest of his party quickly rush forward as he declares that he's not going to let some outsiders saunter off with their Invidit. Rutch and Elma get their third Invidite while the Mithril Whistles are struggling against the ants. As Rutch and Elma collect 4 Invidite crystal stones, Elma says one of them fetches 20 million gold, so they've hit over 100 million gold already. Meanwhile, as the members of the Mithril Whistle are fighting the Orients, one finally takes down his second one, but they still haven't had any drops. Frang suddenly gets attacked by the monster Scarab of Destiny, stunning Elma, who remarks that it has stupidly broken speed and defense stats, but you get a ton of XP if you defeat one. However, the issue is that when it crashes into battle, it randomly casts the spell Pananica, which confuses opponents and becomes a real nightmare to deal with. Ein tries to defeat the Scarab, but it doesn't work. Elma remarks that the Scarab has a defense stat of 500, so even if you perfectly strike it, you won't be able to inflict damage. Elma hurriedly tells Rutch they're going to help them and remarks that fleeing is the correct choice in this situation, but there could be casualties at this rate. Rutch asks if they can catch up to it, so he has a plan and reveals that a single drop item from that bug is enough to offset the cost of this raid for them. He declares that they both are going to be the ones who take down the Scarab of Destiny. A guy hurriedly says their healing can't keep up with all the attacks, so Frang tells him to fall back already if he's confused. However, another guy says the Orients will swarm him if he isolates himself. Ein hurriedly tells Franny they should some distance between themselves and the scarab and reformulate their strategy since they'll be in trouble this way. However, he angrily declares that it's because they all can't crush a few damn bugs, and he'll lose all credibility if they're forced to retreat in this situation. He orders them all to focus on squashing that scarab, hearing which Elma mutters that his people will die on him if he keeps up that attitude. He tells Rutch she needs to draw aggro, but she should make sure she avoids its panica at all costs. Frang hurriedly asks anyone to squash the scarab, so Elma tells him to leave that to them, but he alarmingly says he didn't mean them. As Rutch distracts the scarab, Elma quickly tells her to stand opposite him, remarking that the scarab is fast but its movements are predictable, so once it crashes into something, it immediately charges in the opposite direction. As the scarab rushes towards Elma, he uses shield bash on it so it rapidly charges opposite from him. However, Elma swiftly uses Shadow Stomp on it, seeing which Rutch remarks that she'll be able to hit it at this speed and stabs it with Dragon Slayer Drive. Elma happily sees that the scarab has dropped a Hermes coin and says they've now broken even on the raid with this single item. A man mutters that he was worried about what would happen for a minute there. Frang angrily says he stole their thunder as Elma and Rutch help the others defeat the Orants. Elmo sees that they've really thinned out the numbers and charily tells Rutch their spoils are the most they've ever been by a huge margin. However, he admits most of this will be eaten by the armor synthesis, so their saving grace is that the monsters were easy to slay. The guys tell Elma and Rutch there are a few more ants here and ask for their help, but Frang furiously aims his blade at Elmo's throat and asks his team why they're getting chummy with them. Frang asks who sent them, so Elma says he simply followed the guild's rules and participated in a raid he thought would be lucrative. Frang sees that he's feigning ignorance and tells him to give him 3 of his infinite crystal stones and the rare coin drop if he wants to return to town in one piece. HES, the one who won't be going back in one piece. Elma says depending on the conditions, he's willing to go of 2 invented crystal stones, but that's the maximum concession. Frang continues threatening him, so Elma says he doesn't mind settling things with a duel, but that'll only lead to Frang getting humiliated in front of his clan members, so he should agree to the 2 invented stones. A guy suddenly gets scared of a monster and Elma shockingly sees that it's a level 57 Ruz baby. He hurriedly shouts that this raid is officially cancelled and orders anyone with a detection skill to scan the area, so a guy says he has one. He quickly uses detection and is horrified to see a horde of Ruz babies below them in the ground. The other guys quickly kill the Ruz baby after hearing there are more below them. Elma remarks that he's never seen this monster before, but he doesn't believe that thing is an existence evolved monster. The guys say it didn't put up much of a fight, but they wonder what it is. More Ruz babies suddenly start crawling out of the ground, and Elma questions if they were waiting for the right moment when they would be exhausted. He hears the horses moving around before the carriage is suddenly destroyed as more Ruz babies crawl out from beneath it. A gigantic level 84 monster Ruz Queen rises behind them, shocking Rutch, who questions what that is. Elma says it must be an existential evolved monster and rushes forward, remarking that it's a monster you're assumed to flee if encountered, and he's pretty sure that is the existence evolution of Death Scythe, but it doesn't have outstandingly high stats, and the real issue with this monster is that it's a type of monster that can mass-produce underlings. Elma hurriedly uses Shadow Stomp, but it doesn't even flinch, and Rutch attacks it on the head, but that doesn't affect it either. The Queen suddenly uses Insanity's Resonance, which Elma believes must be a skill that makes the babies focus on one enemy. As they start getting attacked, Rutch says this is endless and their only chance is to create an opening to strike the Queen. However, Elmo tells her to not fall for that and remarks that her weakness is that she can't do any damage if it's not a critical hit. He tells her to focus on thinning out the babbies while memorizing the Queen's attack patterns, but even then, he inwardly admits it'd be bat to let it be as is. However, the clan members start helping Elma out, so he charges forward to focus on the Queen. Ein hurriedly tells Frang they should go help him out, but he tells her to hold up and Evely says they should monitor the situation for a bit longer until Elma collapses in exhaustion, shocking her. I bet all my money I'm dying in the next chapter.